Hello Airfix fans, welcome to the second episode of Sprue Talk. I'm your host, Michael Day, and I'm joined today by Brooke Heydon and Michael Clegg. Now Brooke, you look after our social media, is that correct?
I do indeed.
And you are, Michael, our flight specialist.
I am,
and,
for my sins.
And this will be maybe about the second or third time you've both been on some form of video for Airfix, right?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So forgive us if we're not.
So don't be nervous. I'm sure you are. But it's obviously nice
we're
conversational. If you saw the first episode, it's just us sitting and talking about latest releases. Today we're going to talk a bit about the Airfix community because you're both involved in that side of the brand. And yeah, we'll just have a nice chat about model shows and history. Now, it's well known around the Airfix community and here at work that Michael Clegg is a wealth of knowledge when it comes to history.
No pressure there then.
And,
How many times a day I message you?
And people may have seen Michael Clegg at our shows and at air shows, and they'll probably have had some interaction with Brooke online.
You just don't know it.
So, first latest release we're going to look at is the new tool Tempest, which we have on the table in front of us. There we go. Right, so our flight specialist, Michael, tell us a little bit about the Hawker Tempest. Were you involved in the research or anything development-wise? Or
Well, we've got my sort of people will come across me, I suppose, because I write the catalogue copy and I also do the Workbench blog every week as well. So I researched those from a sort of scheme perspective, but we've got Luke, who was on the first episode. He's our researcher, so he'll do the research to support the guys when they're actually designing the kits. So then I take it to the next level when we're describing the schemes and everything in the blog and put a bit more meat on the bones. But it's a fantastic aeroplane. It's probably one of the most capable aircraft of the Second World War, and you can just see by looking at it, it's dominated by that huge propeller and what have you. But it was we had the Hawker Hurricane, which was our saviour during the Battle of Britain, really, and that's when they wanted to develop that a little bit further. They wanted to build a super Hurricane. And the first one was the Typhoon, which people will know because it looks pretty similar to that, but it was a little bit flawed.
I was just going to say, it's stunning, isn't it, the artwork?
Yeah,
It really sort of captivates it.
we were talking about the artwork before and how...
Yeah, that it's a big thing. I mean, right the way through the ages with Airfix, you know, the thing that used to captivate you to build the next kit was the artwork. It was really iconic, and it's gone full circle now because it's the same sort of iconic artwork, but it's digitally produced this time. So it's interesting that they actually use the same CAD software that the guys used to design the model. That's what they used to do the artwork as well. So it's a sort of symbiotic extension of it, really. So
then why choose the Tempest in particular? Why?
I suppose it's because we've got loads in 1/72 scale, which is the archetypal collector's scale. To be fair, the beauty of it of 1/72 is that you could have something like a Lancaster, and then you've got a Spitfire. And you can see the relative scale between the two aircraft as they would be. But if you get to bigger scales, I mean, you know, we've just announced the big Spitfire in 1/24 scale. If you had a Lancaster, well, we'd need a bigger table because that would be huge. You know, you could have a week's holiday on the back of that. But it's so this one is it's another one of the great aircraft of the Second World War. The only difficulty with this one is the fact that it came so late. Realistically, there wasn't an awful lot of opposition for it to fight. So people they know about Spitfires and Hurricanes and how many enemy aircraft they shot down, but they're not so simply because there wasn't that many opposition aircraft to come up against. But if you think about it's the pinnacle of sort of piston engine design, really. So that's the reason why it's in there, because it is probably one of the most capable aircraft of the Second World War. So it makes for a nice subject. It's quite a big aeroplane as well, realistically, for that scale.
Yeah.
And it just looks great with those D-Day stripes on it, doesn't
yeah,
it?
yeah, it does. Yeah, and so are there any? You just talked about the D-Day stripes, but are there any special design features to it at all? And obviously, it's new tooling, so
there's loads. And I mean, it's interesting when you do the blog, you get to speak to the designers and you get to ask them the searching questions about what they found challenging and what they found rewarding, and young Tom did that when I remember doing that interview with him, and he told me that initially he'd done jets before that, so he was really keen to get stuck into a propeller aircraft because he didn't want to get stuck, as he described it, as jet central, you know. So he moved into that, and he said it was such an iconic design that he just couldn't wait to get started with it. And so they all try and incorporate little bits of their own character in there. So I think what they want to do is they want it to be a faithful representation of the actual aircraft, but then they want to make it an enjoyable build as well. So there's things that they try and incorporate there that make it a little bit easier. And you know, one of the things for somebody like me who's a bit long in the tooth from building these is the worst thing is the clear parts. You know, you always used to get glue all over them, so you'd lavish all this time and attention on your build, and you'd get to the canopy and you'd really mess it up by putting a load of glue on there.
So frustrating.
So they try to make it so that you need very little glue, and there's more where you sort of hook them in rather than having to glue them, so that you only need a little bit of glue just to anchor it in position. And I think that was one of the things that he was really quite impressed with. The other thing was, with it being quite a big aeroplane, he wanted to build in that real rigidity, and I think the top of the wing, he's actually used that really quite cleverly to be his base for the cockpit. So unusually, whereas you build everything up separately and then add it to the side, he's got the cockpit actually on the top wing. So that was one of the areas he was proud with. And the other one is quite unusual really, because it's the drop tanks that go on there. They're actually clear parts in this one, because in sort of on the real aircraft when they were doing this, so they could check where the fuel pipe engaged when they put it on. They actually made that bit out of clear sort of acetate so the ground crew could see it. So he's tried to represent that on the kit, which works really quite well. So
you won't really see that on many kits then?
No, you won't, and it's a nice little bit of design innovation. And these are the things that when you're describing, when you're asking him to describe his work, they offer those as little bit of things. And when you know about them, you look for them when you open the kit, and it's nice when you've had the designer's input at the first before you actually start building it. So that's the beauty of linking the blogging, because we announce that with all the design stuff, and then we follow it right the way through to release. And then when you've read 4 or 5 blogs about it, and then you start building it, and you can appreciate all these little design nuances that the guys have put in. So. And
could you tell us a little bit more about the 2 lovely decals there, the decal scenes we've got on the? You know much about that? There you can have a little look as well.
Thanks, you don't want much on this programme, do you? I'm not coming on here again.
You are the flight specialist, Mr. Clegg.
Thanks for that. I mean, it's just looking at the size of it, we've actually got a built.
Yes, we do, yeah.
And you can actually, if you see it there, you can see the difference between that and the Wildcat, which is an earlier thing, but it's a bit of a brute, isn't it? Really, I mean, it's dominated by that big propeller. But that lead scheme with the D-Day markings is the guy who flew that is Roland Beaumont, and he was sort of instrumental in getting the Typhoon through, because the Typhoon was troubled. That was the initial attempt at producing a super Hurricane. They're all Hawker designs, these, but the tails kept coming off because it's it is. Thank you. It was a really powerful airplane. It had probably the most powerful engine available at the time, and you marry it with quite a diminutive airframe if you possibly can, just to eke every last bit of speed out of it. But with those, I mean, it just looks great. But it tells you that it was around D-Day. So these things entered service, I think, beginning of 1944. So they would have been used in advance of D-Day. So that they've been used to destroy gun emplacements and infrastructure to get support and supplies into the potential battle area. So they were used extensively for that. But because there wasn't an awful lot of enemy aircraft activity for them to use, they were used again against doodlebugs. So that was just after D-Day. So when he started firing these rockets over,
you'll often go down with Luke, the researcher, to the relevant museums, airfields. Yeah,
usually. I mean, Luke's got the benefit of he gets to hit the books, and he gets to find all the little details that the design guys need to incorporate into their tools. I'm more, I suppose my side is more. I'm the go-between our end users, our collectors, and I've got that enthusiasm and history of the brand realistically, and it's so from the business side, we've got that, which is obviously crucially important, but I try and bring the passion and the the sort of the modeler side to it. And it's a privileged position really to be, because in the years past I was selling these things, so now I'm in a position where you can actually try and influence it a little bit. And I know what would have interested me when I was modelling actively. Now I've just got a huge stash up in the loft, and if we ever have a fire, I'll be petrified in plastic. But that's a different story. But it is interesting that you get the chance to do this. I was in retail as well for a while, so I was selling them as well. So it's a fascinating sort of journey that I've personally been on. But if you can, to people, they're not just little bits of plastic. They're actually little projects and little bits of history that you're recreating realistically. So it's nice if you can, if you can get that across and give people, because each individual model that we do, there's a really interesting story behind them, and it's as you're building it. Because that's the thing that stopped me building, because I'd get a kit and I'd think, I'm really looking forward to this, and then I'd buy different decals, I'd buy a lot of books, I'd start reading about it, and I might have spent 6 months doing that, and by the end of it I got bored, so I moved on to a different one. So I've got loads of books,
still sat
loads of
gathering
books,
dust,
loads of kits, and not many built ones, but this one is a really, really nice one because of that extra size and the fact that it was one of the most potent aircraft of the Second World War. I think that, it was in service at the time of the German jet, the Me-262, and I think 262 pilots said the aircraft that they would least like to meet on a one-to-one basis was that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because it was a really, really capable aircraft at all altitudes, really. Yeah. So that's a good reason to do it, because we've obviously got 262s in the range and other stuff as well. So it is just an interesting subject. And the other scheme is, I think that's a New Zealand squadron, and they were all really capable. They were having to destroy other things because there weren't the aeroplanes there, so they were having to go after ships or barges or locomotives, anything. But it all had valuable sort of impact on the war, because it was stopping the Germans being able to reinforce the landing zones and what have you. So it had a valuable part to play. Interesting that with these, they were so potent and they were so powerful. They look a little bit like a Focke-Wulf, which is a German fighter. So when they had to put markings underneath them because our own people were shooting at them because it was so capable. And it was an unusual type, because they were used to elliptical wings of Spitfires and stuff. So they were having a quick pop at it because they thought it was going to be a type. So I think a lot of these pilots used to come back, and there was more damage to their aircraft from enemy, from friendly fire than there was from enemy. But, he's done a really good job of this. It's a beautiful, beautiful little kit, really, really detailed, and and everything's subtle. But whoever's finished that, it's lovely, because they've even got the little exhaust and the gun as well. Stains and whatever. Yeah, so.
Definitely one that people are going to enjoy at home, I think.
Especially with the story of the pilot, the first one. It'd be difficult to look past that one, because Beaumont was he was really famous because he had the chance to be. I think it was Trafford Lee Mallory's. It could have been his man sort of thing, but he didn't. He went to Hawkers, and it's a good job he did, because he got the Typhoon through. And if the Typhoon hadn't got through because it was having the problems with the tail ripping off, this wouldn't have got developed. And Sidney Cam, the designer, he always wanted to have his Super Hurricane, and that is the closest to a Super Hurricane as you can get, because it was. And then when they changed it, when they developed it to the Mark II, they actually changed the engine. So the engine is it's a radial on the next one. So even though it's the same aircraft, it looks completely different because it's not got that big chin. We haven't got that in the range, so I'll be quiet about that. Probably. that might be one for the future. But,
you never know. Never say never.
He just has a little bit of knowledge on them.
Yeah, just tiny of it. This is what we wanted. This is why we brought you on the show, Mike.
You mean you were just about to say shut up?
No. I was about to say you mentioned the Wildcat as well when we were talking about that, and that is also a new release. Brooke, do you want to pass me the Wildcat at the front? I think we've got the box as well, which is great. So what we'll do is we'll talk a little bit about this little beauty.
I think Brooke's an expert on the Wildcat.
Have you had, obviously, much interaction about the Wildcat online or anything like that?
Yeah, it's been received really, really well.
Yeah?
Really well as a reintroduction.
And could you tell us a little bit more about the Wildcat? Because I get confused between the Wildcat
and the Hellcat. Right.
Why am I getting confused between
Likewise.
that? Other than the fact that I don't know, but...
Well, that's its predecessor. That's its little brother, realistically. Right. So... everything that they learned on the Wildcat they incorporated into the Hellcat, and the Hellcat was probably Well, it's difficult because you get attached to all these things. You can find positive things about them all, but it made probably more difference than any other American aircraft, the Hellcat. But it's a stubby little thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
But
it is genuinely the little brother if you compare it to the Hellcat that we do as well.
Well, if you put the two side by side, you look and you think there's no comparison. But every single one of these models, it's all about timing, because this thing was at the beginning of the war, and I think the British, we desperately needed as many aeroplanes as we could get at the time. So we wanted this. We ordered this before the American Navy did, even though they developed it. So it made its combat introduction in British colours, which is unusual. But because it is a stubby little thing. It's got the square wings. You think it looks like it's quite a it wouldn't be much good, but it was as tough as old boots, this thing, and it was the aeroplane that you needed. At that time of the war. So this is the one that helped America strike back realistically. So after Pearl Harbor, this was their most numerous sort of carrier fighter. So this had to take the fight through the Pacific realistically. And although if it's going up against the Zero, which was one of the best fighters of the Second World War, but they all had pluses and minuses, and what you do is as a pilot, you learn the strengths of yours and the weaknesses of the enemy, and you just play to the two, so they wouldn't never get involved in a dogfight because they'd get done, but they called it slash and run, so they'd use altitude and speed, and they'd attack them and then just disappear and then reform and do it again. That way they had more chance. But these had self-sealing fuel tanks, so if they took a strike onto the stray bullet from wherever, because you can imagine in a dogfight these things are turning, it could have been another American bullet.
You need to pilot those.
It could have been anything, but it wouldn't go down. Whereas if it was in a Zero, if it took a strike in the fuel tanks, the chances are its wing would fall off. It just set burning, and there was a lot of protection for the pilot as well. But this particular one, we've been talking about that. These were so important at the beginning of the war because they allowed the Allies to keep on fighting, really, because we were really on the back foot at that time. But we got hold of decent numbers of these. I think the French ordered them, but of course unfortunately they had to surrender, so we got their allocation as well. But in this particular scheme, it's interesting because this is Operation Torch. So this is when the Americans and the British and Commonwealth operated in an invasion for the first time, really. So and so this marking here is because it's not quite a US marking, but it's not a British marking. So it's a bit of a hybrid. But they were going into French-held North Africa, and the French were still fighting the Vichy friends, the ones that didn't capitulate, sort of thing. I shouldn't have said that word, should I? But never mind. They wanted to identify the aircraft because obviously for friendly fire, because in the Mediterranean region there had been Italian aircraft, there had been British, there had been the Americans, and even German ones as well. So they wanted to minimise the chance of friendly fire. So the British ones, if you think about if you look at the other one, our RAF Roundel on that one, we overpainted the centre of ours with this star, so the British ones had the same sort of marking. So you can see where they'd have just painted a white star over the top. And that's what, and some, but not exclusively all, had the little yellow. We just kept it on ours, but some of the American ones did and some didn't. But it was all to aid identification. So these were operating in different areas, but they went in to cover the landing beaches. So this was a D-Day light, so to speak, maybe a precursor, but to open the second front. So the forces that were coming against were French. So and they didn't think that they'd take too kindly to British people in the invasion. They thought they might be more sympathetic to the Americans, which is why we've made our aircraft look like this as well. So it's interesting from that perspective.
I really like it.
Perhaps
really like the look of it.
The most interesting thing is the fact that when they were attacking the French airfields, it was American aircraft fighting against American aircraft because the French were operating Curtiss Hawk fighters, so it was US on US, even though they were operating for different forces, which is unusual. So Torch, it doesn't get an awful lot of recognition, but that's great. And the little Wildcat is it's a fantastic little fighter. And
this is probably going to alienate me from a lot of public at home, but why make planes look completely different? Why make them, why can't I not just make this you know, the Tempest again and again and again and again and again? Why have other people chose to, you know, change the style, change the look of them? Is it like you were saying?
It's a really good question. How long have we got? I think this episode's going to last about 15 hours. It's different manufacturers, different ideas. I mean, all the manufacturers, they all think that they're better than the next man, so they'll try and incorporate it. But of course, with these, it's eras, because the Wildcat is significantly earlier than the Tempest. And the Wildcat realistically was a naval fighter, so it needed to be robust. It needed to be reasonably small. I mean, we operated out of our carriers, and they were an awful lot smaller than the US
Built
ones.
for sea.
Yeah, so and it's just different design things. That the Wildcat was everything about it was rugged, and one's got an inline engine, the British one, and one's got a radial engine. But and you can see the lineage very much between that and the Hellcat, because there's a lot of design similarities with that. It's just everything was bigger, everything was more powerful. What you tend to find with a lot of designers, it's for whatever its purpose was. So that was a little fighter. So what they'd be given, they'd try and use the biggest, most powerful engine they possibly could, and then they'd build the rest of the aeroplane around that, and try and make it, you know, if it was a high level one, it probably needed bigger wings, so it'd be a bit bigger. And you know, the bigger it is, the more fuel, the more ammunition you can carry. So it's a really good question. I'll give you that one.
I know obviously you could go on for ages about it, but it was just an interesting thing that I thought. Same with cars, same thing like that, isn't it? But you talked about bigger, so let's go up a little bit in our size to the Bristol Blenheim. Now, can you tell us a little bit more about this one?
Oh, that's me again, is it? Right, thanks for that.
Not the aviation experts.
It's pretty, you know, from a historic perspective, it's very much like the Wildcat in the fact that this was an early war sort of machine. We had more of these in service at the time of, you know, the start of the war and sort of into the Battle of Britain than any other aircraft type, realistically. When it was first introduced, it was a civil airliner. We had there was a chap who wanted us. He was sick of the Germans having all the records, so he commissioned this Bristol company to build this airliner. It was going to be the fastest in the world, and he did it, and it was great. So the only sort of embarrassing thing about that is the fact that it was faster than all the current RAF fighters. So he said, well, you know, because this is so good, wouldn't it be great if we could turn it into a bomber? So that's what they did, and that's what the Blenheim is. It was basically a bomber version of this first fastest civilian airliner. But the one that we've done there is the next incarnation of it, because the first one's had a really short nose. You can't see the nose past the engine nacelles, but this one has got an elongated nose. So this one's the Mark IV. But historically still, it's such an important aircraft. It never gets the love because it's, you know, there's more enigmatic aircraft later in the war, like the Mosquito and the Lancaster and the Spitfire.
It's still really distinctive.
It is. Those are the aircraft that people, you know, remember. If you're going to build one, you build a Spitfire or a Mosquito. You know, that's what people love. But this one is it's the precursor, and it deserves a lot more respect because, you know, even though it was best of breed, it was best in the world at the time. Every other aircraft knew, especially, you know, German aircraft, they knew this was the one that had to be bettered. So, if you will, as soon as this was sort of entered into service, every single aircraft that has been produced after that had to be better than this, because that was the benchmark. So, the time the Second World War came along, this poor thing was outdated, really, and all the enemy aircraft could have a go at it. But historically, I think it was the first, when we made our first raids, it was Blenheims that did it. Certainly the first fighter raid was mounted against a seaplane base by fighter versions of this. But, you know, it started off as a bomber, but because it was so numerous and because it was so adaptable, they made it into a fighter. So the variants that we've got there are fighter versions, as you can see, because there's a gun pack underneath it.
I was going to ask about that.
Which and then they've got those tiny little bombs, which they almost look comical because they're so small. But it was
it's not
you
the
know,
size.
No, but they were, you know, they were just little things that they could use. But if you will, I mean, things were moving on. They were already developing the big 4-engine heavy bombers by then, realistically. But
so they're very different. The schemes there, you know, very contrasting in terms of, you know, the nice camo and then basically black.
Well,
now again, this might sound like a stupid question. Why those two schemes? Is that would they have been travelling at night maybe?
See, that you do know your stuff. We're turning into an aviation fan before you know it. It's just, and it's interesting because if you look at the first scheme, it's actually got a black and white underside, so it's different incarnations. The camouflage on RAF aircraft changed, throughout the war realistically, but certainly the biggest period of change was from sort of 37 onwards, and that with the black and white, it would aid sort of identification from below, but ordinarily that's not what you want. Certainly if you're operating over enemy territory, you don't want to be seen. You want to be, you want to be masked and camouflaged. That's what it's all about realistically. So it's interesting from that, but it's also interesting that it is that strike version of a long range fighter. So it's got the bombs. I think they could carry 8. Mm-hmm. They were only £20 and £40. One was a fragmentation bomb. One was a high explosive bomb, but you've got the guns as well. So even though it was, I think both of the schemes were night fighter squadrons. They were formed as. That one ended up doing sort of long range maritime patrols, and so give it an attack capability as well, realistically. But the all black one, the Blenheim was very much front and centre in setting up our sort of night fighter defence, which was pretty rudimentary, or should we say non-existent, realistically, because you wouldn't really be perfecting that if you weren't at war, would you? So those ones were dedicated night fighters. I think that one was based in Shropshire, so it was protecting like the industrial Midlands, realistically. But they carried a rudimentary radar, so they would have that, and it was a big enough aircraft to do that realistically. So you could put these radar sets in, and they could keep practicing to make sure they could do the night interception, because it was a lot easier. Because if you think about it, if you couldn't actually identify your target, you were just mounting patrols, and it was a real waste of time and effort. And you could be up there for, you could be on plenty of missions and you'd not see anything. So if you had a radar, at least give you a chance, wouldn't it? So, do you want me to shut up now? You do, don't you?
No, I just think it's quite a popular kit, actually, isn't it? Did you feature it on Flight Deck, Nick?
No, it's actually in the next Flight Deck.
Oh, there you go. In the next Flight Deck,
Spoiler.
you're going to see the spoiler. You're going to see the Bristol Blenheim Clegg up in the next Flight Deck. Have we agreed a safe word for you, Michael, when I do want you to, so I don't stop over the...
I thought you said it was a punch.
We'll go to starter sets next, and for many people at home, you write Airfix blogs as well. I know Workbench has obviously come out recently and includes the Bugatti. Right?
It does, yeah.
So let's have a chat about that, shall we? You tell us a little bit more about the new Bugatti Chiron.
No, because it's a car. It's got 4 wheels and it's
so I'm going to come around there and
get go in the air.
It's a no-no. I'm out of it now.
It's a no-no
but you're not going to let me get away with that, are you? So. The interesting thing about these is it's the starter sets have got a big part to play in Airfix history, realistically, because you want people to come into the hobby, but you want them to enjoy the experience. And the guys, it's really interesting to speak to them, because they're aware of that, but how do they incorporate it into the kits? Because traditionally what we've done, we've just put a kit, a standard kit as a starter set, and but that's the same that everybody would make. But I think what they thought about with this, they wanted to consider somebody who had maybe never made a kit before, or somebody that was coming back to the hobby after a break, and potentially they might not have any help or support, and they might not. I know we've got loads of on our YouTube channel. We've got loads of help and for people for looking at various stages of the model build. But I think it was just like a Sunday morning project where they opened it, they had a go at it, and they found the experience pretty rewarding.
Yeah.
We've got these. We have changed them in the past, because if you remember, anybody who read the blog will see that a couple of years ago we did the guys did a Sherman Firefly, a Tiger 1, a Spitfire, and a Hawk jet, and they were really clever how they did it, because they made they used the standard tool, but they made a simplified version of it as well. So the difficult thing on a tank to do is obviously the wheel structure, because there's loads of them, and if you're doing them individually, which we all had to do actually when I was a young. We never had starter kits, but that's another story. It can be quite time consuming, and you do need a little bit of help and support, because
they're definitely designed with a beginner in mind.
Yeah.
I built the Bugatti Chiron on this Sunday just passed.
Wow.
And my husband did the Tiger one.
Yeah.
Actually, it was so surprisingly easy. They come moulded, obviously coloured, as you can see. That's the tank, obviously. But that immediately makes it 10 times easier. The instructions are really easy to follow.
Yeah.
And, that starts a hobby of a lifetime for you.
Yeah.
You've done that for a starter set.
There's nothing worse than coming into a hobby and feeling like, I've seen, a Vulcan or a Hellcat or something like that. And it's perfect and they've put all this extra stuff on. Yeah. I'm never going to get to that.
Yeah, you think that's way out of my league.
Yeah, but getting in with a nice starter set, which you can make something simply, and it teaches you the fundamentals of it, is like you say, that start of something more that then they can go on, hopefully, in however many years, they're going to get to the Vulcan, they're going to get to the Hellcat.
Well, it's got to be an enjoyable experience, and if they find it rewarding, then they'll want to do it again. If they've had frustrations, and I think that was a key element of the design, because the new ones are a step ahead even of the ones that we looked at before. When they did the full fat version and the cut down version of the Sherman tank. Well, these have been designed from the outset specifically with less parts, easier to go together. But look at, if you look at that, it's still a beautiful model. And the key thing...
I didn't do that one.
No.
You should have said that. You should have kept that bit quiet.
Yeah. Mine had a bit more glue on the,
on the windows. Yeah.
So they've designed that so that there's less parts.
Yeah,
so
39 parts, right?
Yeah, so they actually have to mould it. It's really difficult for them. When they were talking about it, I think they thought it would be easier than it actually turned out to be, because they've got to do the part splits differently to how they would do it on a traditional kit, because there's less parts, so there's more bits, if you will, joined together, but whilst retaining that detail and the enjoyment to build it. And interestingly, if you hold the sprue parts up, they've done that differently as well, because we call that a frame. Well, they're different on these new ones because it's more of a tree. The way that traditionally, so it's easy, so that if you haven't got all the tools and equipment, that you can actually take them off. You're just working them off with your hands, which is what we used to do in years past. So it's a nice nod back to the old kits that now I'm not that old that used to get from Woolworths, but you know what I mean, when they used to come in the bagged kits and they were on those frames, people just used to work them off. They didn't used to use all the tools,
because there are two generations interested in Airfix kits, model building. The first were introduced into the hobby by a parent, grandparent, and then the generation now won't have been introduced. So it's it's trying to target those people, and these kits are perfect for that. But in saying that, you don't have to be a beginner to build a starter set. You might just want an easier build.
Because that's the beauty of that, because it looks great when you've finished it and you put it out. Whether you paint it or not, I think, did you say these are moulded in red? Because the one you did is red. So it'll make it perfectly, because it'll be red, but your wheels will still be, you'll have all that detail in the wheels. So it'll be a perfectly acceptable model whether you decide to paint it or not. And I think that's the thing that spurs you on to the next one, doesn't it, really?
Funnily enough, the first thing I noticed is the brake pads inside, which I was quite impressed at in terms of detail.
Yeah, definitely.
To get right down to within those, the rivets inside there and the brake pads and things. It's just quite impressive, I think.
When we saw in the development meeting, when we saw the test models, that was the thing that stuck out. Wasn't it? That wheel detail looks really quite impressive.
Yeah. And you've had a good response, I suppose, from again these, because it's a new range.
Yeah,
definitely.
A 43rd scale. Yeah.
It's because again the scale's different as well, isn't it? Because we've gone into, this is the same. We've got other brands obviously in the portfolio. So a Corgi Vanguard is that same scale. So it's going into same sort of collector scales, rather than, because traditionally I think they were. With the 32nd, I can't remember, 35th scale, they were slightly bigger, the old one. So this is a complete new range. But I mean, the finesse.
There is demand for them to be bigger, and change is always a risk.
Yeah,
with change, but you have to try these things tonight, don't you?
Yeah, I think these will be really well received, because they are so detailed, and they make such nice models. But I'm just wondering where the wings come in on this, because I don't think these fly, do they? So that's a bit dodgy. But
you can put wings on them if you want.
Yeah, I'll do that. Yeah,
mix it up
a little modification. But speaking to the guys, I mean, it was really interesting to discover they toiled with that, really, because it wasn't an easy thing to achieve, to keep it faithful to the actual subject, but to make it easier. And I think the whole thing about the model itself, because there's a little helpful hints sheet that comes with it. It's basically as if the designer is over your shoulder saying that's what you need to do, and it's allowing somebody to get stuck in straight from the off and make a really good fist at having a first model. So and the small number of parts means that they're not going to get glue everywhere. They're not going to get and even when they did the clear parts with these, they tried to make it so it was did the thing where you hook things in so you don't have to put loads of glue on and stuff. So it's really really cleverly done, and I think it's for the hobby, for the brand, it's really quite exciting because it should hopefully let everybody have a go, and hopefully it's an enjoyable experience, because it doesn't have to take as long as maybe it did somebody like me all those years ago. Well, not that long.
So all of these are currently available, which is great, and you may even be getting them to go on your Workbench. And if you are, and you want to share your builds, social media, that's where it's going to go. We'd love to see your builds. It's great seeing that side of things, isn't it? And just people, especially with the starter sets,
huge,
getting their first dip and dipping their toe into the hobby. So yeah, do share them on all of our platforms. That leads quite nicely onto what I was sort of quite excited about talking to today, is community and the Airfix community. Obviously I have involvement with YouTube and that side of community things. But engagement with the community has been a big part of Airfix and Hornby hobbies in general over the last few years, hasn't it? And obviously you've been with Hornby for
7 years,
and then you came on.
I'm a new piece of furniture, really. I've only been here 6 months.
But you came on with that kind of fresh thing of, right, we want to start engaging with the community, give them what they want.
I was so shocked when I started. I thought, how do you communicate the activity of a brand that existed for so many years without digital? Didn't need it. I really didn't need to worry. The community is just buzzing. It's amazing. The support that modeler to modeler, it's great to see. It's great to be a part of.
So then let's start with kind of what you then do in your role, so the people at home may not know.
So what you'll see on social media, I've worked with the research and design team to create and gather and post. So I do that across Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, Spotify. No, it was and YouTube. But I also run the Airfix Club.
Nice.
Members Club.
Yeah, we talked about that last time, actually.
And then I'll write for the website as well, for the I Build Bookers campaign that you might have heard of. And other bit digital bits and pieces.
And then obviously you both work in community, so then we now know that you're very well versed in flights and all things aviation. Tell us a little bit more about what it is you do for Airfix, because I also mentioned the blogs and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I try, if I'm being honest, I try and stick my nose into as many things as I can possibly do. But it's that the main reason for being brought in was to set up the blogs and to get that community side going, because it was just to act as a bit of a go-between, to give people extra information, and because we know how passionate people are about the hobby out there, and about Airfix as a brand. So we established a series of blogs. So it's actually, we're coming up to our 200th edition in the not too distant future, and 7th anniversary in the same month, would you believe? Wow. So it's it's and the big thing about that.
A cake now.
That's it.
That's the only reason he mentioned it.
If it's shaped like a car, I don't want it. But and the beauty of it is that we were backed from day one that they'd let us keep the old editions of the blogs on. So that means that as people discover them, they can go back and they can find things. And of course, if people do a search and they want a little bit of information about the Tempest, perhaps they could put the search in there, and chances are we would come up and it gives them all the information and details. Because sometimes when you're looking for a project to do, you sit, and most of the guys who watch this will have huge stashes of kits, and it'll just be a conveyor belt of stuff. But you know, sometimes you want a little bit of inspiration, and if you can read something in the blog that really just hits home with you, and you think, well, I'm going to make that the next build, well, it's great. But people are really passionate about this stuff, and it's just a celebration of the models, of the subjects. Like I said in the first place, it's a little bit of history. You know, they are scale models, but they're beautiful small versions of the real thing. So it's, you know, it is nice to find out a little bit about the you know, the aircraft or the car or the tank that you know that you're building, and that's where we come in with the blogs. And we've been dead lucky because the Airfix blog, it wasn't the first one. I don't think. I think we did one with, I think it was a pre-existing one with trains, but we won't mention that. But they we came in, and honestly, the figures from day one were fantastic. We've got a massive readership all over the world, and they're really loyal. And it's it's quite a privilege to be able to do that, and to take that to the people. And of course, from my perspective, because I'm not one of the talented designers, I don't get to do that, but I do get to talk to them, and it's, you know, I can sit there, you know, open mouthed, and I think sometimes it's nice if you've got that level of interest and you can put that into the writing that you do, then it's hopefully it's going to be received well at the other end. So that's what we try and do. And then working with Brooke, I mean, it all dovetails together because we share information all the time. We plan what we're going to do. We've got, you know, ideas for the rest of the year, and it's all pretty. I keep using the word symbiotic. I don't know where that's coming from.
I don't write these really impressive long blog posts, and I'm posting bite-sized chunk captions to social. But I don't know how many times a week I message you. Well,
it's very different formats, isn't it? You know,
it is
that you're going it for long form writing, and then.
But we're both talking. We're both, you know, it's for the same community. You know, and it's just they're consuming that in different ways. And
even the blogs are bite-sized, because if you think about the fact, because we leave it on, it's not timed, so you can come back and you can just read a couple of pages and then come back to it a little bit later.
You know, long form would be a book, I guess.
Well, that's it. And when we started doing this, you know, somebody said, "Oh, why don't you turn them into a book?" And I'm thinking, it'd be huge, that thing. You know, they get bored after the first few pages. But
one best-selling author.
And the beauty of it is as well, it's interspersed with the imagery, and I think Airfix imagery is pretty iconic. That's the thing that drags you in. So the first thing that you're drawn to with anything that either Brooke or myself do is the artwork. It's just it's just so it goes hand in glove with it.
This week, I think by the time this goes out, the post will be a week old. But we posed the question: is the current digital artwork rivaling the work of Roy Cross?
Oh, you do know how to ask ruffling questions.
Very different styles, though.
I know. Oh, yeah, absolutely. So then, what have you seen any differences in the community since you started to now?
I've definitely seen it grown, which is fantastic to see. We're quite active on social at the moment, and I think people have noticed that, and we'll always engage back with people. We'll talk to them. I'm in quite a privileged position myself, because I get to speak to hundreds of people every day, and I get to see all these amazing builds that get sent in, you know, and it's a very difficult task trying to pick one to post, that day or that week, which is something I'll often take to Clegg or to the design team, and I'll say, "Oh God, look at this," you know. So yeah, I promise you, I do look at every single build that comes through and answer every message. But I've definitely seen it expand over the past 6 months, which is just fantastic.
And are you anything like me, both of you, in that you feel very close to the work you're producing, and you want for our audience and our community to really like it, love it? You know what I mean?
Absolutely. My head is constantly thinking, you know, what do the modelers want to see? What do the audience want to see? There's no other way to do this job. You know, I don't think.
And it's difficult because we're disseminating company information realistically, so we get the business side, but I think our allegiance is definitely to the audience, and we always think about, you know, whether they would like it, whether, you know, you want their approval, but basically you want to be giving them things that they find interesting, even if it's only for a few minutes a day, because life's hard, isn't it? You know, if we can put something out there and it just gives them a little escape for, you know, a couple of minutes.
Start a conversation. You know, there's the hobby itself, a lot of people do to find a bit of solace, to have a bit of peace and quiet. And there are two sides to it, I think. You know, you're either a solo builder, you build, you keep it to yourself, done, dusted, or you're very active in the community. You're taking photos, you're posting them, you're talking with people, you're sharing tips. I spend all day talking to these great people.
They are quite self-regulating as well, because if somebody says something that's a little bit negative, the people come on and be really quite protective of things, because in the main, if somebody goes on there with an issue, somebody will come on and help them, and it's nice. That's one thing that we didn't have in the old days when. I keep going on about that. I'm not that old, honestly. But
in mind.
You had to learn by experience, really. So you had to have a go, and the first few were a bit iffy, but then you'd get a little bit better, and then you'd do one that you thought was great, and then, as happened to me, you hand it to your mum, and she showed it to her friend and broke the thing. So it's devastating. But it's and when you look at the builds, Brooke mentioned about the builds. I mean, to me, it's not about. Some of them are museum quality, some are absolutely astounding,
amazing.
But then there's others that maybe not so, but there's a story behind it, and it's somebody that's come back to modelling after a few years, or it's somebody that they've had an illness and they just wanted a pastime, and they put all that time and attention in it, and they're equally valid, aren't they? I think it's that's the beauty of the hobby, really. You can.
Well, is there such thing as a bad build if you've enjoyed it?
Exactly. I like that could be a catchphrase.
I think people will say yes, there is.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? With any type of hobby that's anything like Airfix, and is it the end product, or is it that
the enjoyment
of that journey? I know I've done things where maybe I'm not that happy with it, but actually by the end of it, it's just like, I want to get on to the next one because I enjoy that process of doing it, as opposed to necessarily showing it off and things like that.
Or you've had a gap and you sort of lost your mojo a bit. Yeah. You might come and talk to people in the community, or just silently browse and have a look, and it gives you that bit of motivation to get started again. And
ordinarily in the old days, not again. But sorry, I'll stop saying that in a bit. But if you will, if you do a build and you put it on social media, it happens in seconds now, and people can see it. Whereas before, it would be you'd only see that build if you either went to the person's house or if they showed a model show. But the one thing I do like about this, it's we looked at the box artwork, but these are just 3D versions of art. Realistically, it's a 3-dimensional bit of art, because the work that these guys put, it's astonishing, really, just how clever they are and do this stuff.
Oh, I'm blown away.
Yeah.
Blown away.
That's why mine all are in the loft, because I couldn't do it to that standard. When Paramjit, our designer, when he builds them, you just look at them and you just think, he's really talented, that lad. So not only does he design them, he actually builds them to that level as well. So
practice makes perfect.
There's a couple of mine I actually said to him, would you make it for me? And he said, yeah. He didn't tell me a price, but
it's checkbook out.
If you've been on the social media platforms, you might have seen some of the stashes that people have shared, and I'm talking like floor to ceiling stashes. So you've got you have people that buy 2 models, one to build, one to keep, and
that's
it's just
that's proper modeller and collector mentality. That I can concur.
I
with
might
that.
have started doing that with my particular modelling hobby. That I've got buying one to keep in its box. And
pristine.
Yeah. That's if I was to ask you, for each of you, what's your favourite thing about your social media, your role, the Airfix community? What is it that I suppose keeps you going in the job? Do you know what I mean?
I love the fact that I can connect with hundreds, thousands of people every single day by doing my job. If that helps someone's mental health, to go on and talk to them and share tips and get people talking to each other. What an incredible job to have. I was going to mention Model for Heroes. We've they're a fantastic company. You might have heard of them. So they're all about encouraging the hobby for mental health. We posted the other day a former armed forces Nicky, his name is. He's actually gone. He's obviously left now, but he's modelling, and it's helped his mental health so much. By posting that story, we had over 100 comments, I think, of people saying, I too suffer, my mental health is X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
Nikki unfortunately suffers with PTSD.
Yeah.
And that was the story. And suddenly out of the woodwork, all of these people were confessing they have the same thing.
Yeah.
And what a powerful tool
To be able
social
to,
media is.
Yeah.
To help even in a small way with something like that is, it's quite humbling, really.
Even if it's just by giving them, like you said, a moment of reading the blog, and for that moment they're just away from whatever stresses they've got, or they're engaging with their community and they're able to open themselves up to that. What about yourself then? What would be?
I don't know. I mean, it's difficult because obviously taking the people on the journey and having them come with us was a really proud thing. But it's playing your own little part in the continued history of this fantastic brand. I think that's probably the proudest thing. It's because it's going that full circle. But I do always, I'm lucky to get to go into the meetings with all the big guys and what have you, and it's holding out for our end users really. Being able to produce stuff that's for them, as opposed to that's more corporate driven, I suppose. So, and the fact that the business do support us in the fact that we say we want to leave the old ones on for people to, and we want to keep developing things, and it's just the numbers of people who've come with us and stayed with us. It's pretty humbling, really. Yeah. But my Airfix tattoo that I'm quite proud of that as well.
We won't.
We're not showing that.
So then I'll go the opposite way, and I think you're probably going to say the same thing. What's the least sort of favourite part about social media community?
Be careful here, that I don't get fired. No, I mean you're always going to receive negative feedback, and social media is a place for people to share feedback. It's easy, it's quick, you can do it, but it's never nice going through, and seeing, negative things being said about your brand. And I remember the week I started, someone commented something negative, and I said to my boss, should I reply? And he said, no, just give it 5 minutes. And I did. And then suddenly we had all these Airfix fans coming to our aid. Which is then the positive side of things. And I'm guessing it probably maybe be the same sort of thing.
Similar sort of thing. I mean, you do get, well, not thick skin, but you do know that you can't appeal to everybody, and you just have to accept that. And if you put stuff out there with the best will in the world, and you're trying to, keep people entertained and informed with the stuff, I mean, it's like we've gone to a weekly blog now for Airfix, which was a big step. I mean, it gives people that surety that every single Friday there's going to be a blog there waiting for them. But because you're putting perhaps less subjects in each one now, you can clearly see that there's a favoured sort of hierarchy of subject matter realistically. So, you'll get guys who. And it's so important to put things in like the new starter sets and the idea behind it and the design and the thinking behind it. But because it's a car, aeroplanes win all the time. Thankfully, I would say that though, won't I? But that's the favourite subject.
It is true.
And it's so there is a pecking order of subject matter. But it's a valuable story to tell, and it's on there for people to see, and they can go back there and consume it at their leisure as and when. But I think it's more accepting the fact that you can't, no matter how. I mean, because we stress so much about what the content and what we're putting in, and whether we're keeping it new and interesting and fresh for people to read. But you'll never tick every single box. There'll always be somebody that's not. You just have to accept that realistically.
Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, we all do it in general, like in the sense of, I don't like this, and you sort of say, I don't like this product from this manufacturer or anything like that, forgetting that although you can see the name, underneath there's all these people that are passionate and they're working hard,
definitely.
and you kind of.
And don't get me wrong, by all means, your opinion matters. We
definitely.
can't run without those. But is it a favourite part of my job? Going through those? No,
I think you generally. I think that's something that you'll find across the board when it comes to social media and community and online and things like that. That it's very easy for that negativity's sake, rather than the feedback and things like that is a little bit different. But like you said, once you get into those communities where they're kind of looking after each other,
self-regulating.
It's an amazing thing.
So thank you and keep doing that.
Yeah. Thumbs up to the Airfix community.
I just wanted to say, sorry, I don't feel like I explained Model for Heroes.
I was going to ask you actually about that.
So in support of armed forces and emergency services.
Yeah.
And it's actually their 48th birthday.
Really?
coming up. So they're doing a 48-hour birthday bash group build across the world.
You're involved? Are you
I'll have to go and raid the loft.
So 48 hours.
Yeah, building 48 scale kits
Wow.
across the world, and people will be joining in live.
Yeah.
So if we could put something down the bottom.
Yeah. When's that? We'll put some
It's
information in
Friday the 25th of March,
and
2022, so not far.
Do we know if it's a live stream or something like that?
I'm not sure on the format, but I presume so. Yeah, I think
we'll
it'll be live.
put a link down on the
Yes.
on the bottom so that you can all have a click at their events, and actually we're being joined by Models for Heroes next month,
in the next episode,
which will be great,
Yeah,
and we can talk all about what they do, the great things that they do. So
you can donate flying hours. I think I'm pointing to the right thing.
Yeah, somewhere in there.
Flying hours. To Model for Heroes.
Great way of helping out. It's just
and it means the world.
Hours.
It means the world to them and to these people. So
brilliant.
Yeah, please do keep doing it.
Well, so thank you for sort of discussing community in general. I'm sure for many people at home who have read the blogs and seen social media, it's nice to kind of put a face to that person that they're reading on the other side, so that they and hopefully we'll be able to talk more and more about community and things like that. I wanted to talk kind of, it is community, but specifically model shows, because we've started to come back to model shows and doing events. The Spitfire event, you were both there, and I suppose where Brooke, you came in when we weren't doing that, to somewhat of a veteran with all the different events and things.
I regret that age. I keep going back to years. Veteran.
So back in your day,
veteran of events.
Thanks for that.
But before we go on, can you please? Where's Cleggy?
Oh no.
So this is it. So you've attended a lot of events where we said you've been seen about, and I heard pray tell a little story about something called Where's Cleggy. Now people at home will know Where's Wally.
Thanks for that. Thanks for making that little connection. Yeah.
But I think there's a little story that I'd like you to tell me about, because I only got the ins and the outs bit.
I'm sorry, Mum. I regret this. Please don't hold it against me.
Where's Cleggy and what happened?
Right. This was my previous boss in the online team. Thought it'd be rather nice if he would circulate the fact that I was going to be at Farnborough Air Show, and he put a picture of me on the social media in an Airfix t-shirt, so I had to wear an Airfix t-shirt as well. And it was a case of, where's Michael? Find Michael at Farnborough Air Show, and it's just not on this. And you win a prize. So
sounds pretty good.
Not really. I turned up, and where did I get accosted? In the toilet. So and we'll take it no further than that. But that's where I got recognised, in the loos.
And how did you react to that?
How do you think? I'll let you think of that one. I can't believe you brought this story. I was trying to be all professional before this. Now.
he just tapped you on the shoulder. He didn't try and take a picture or anything like
that. No. Thankfully not.
We won't name and shame.
But it was most disconcerting, I must admit. But I mean, the one thing about shows is it is absolutely fantastic when you get out to meet the people, and if you have anything that's Airfix branded, you can't walk. You can't even go to the toilet without being accosted. But you can't walk too far without somebody wanting to ask. But I mean, isn't that quite a nice thing to do? If you're out there and somebody's asking you about the latest kits, or if they know that you're the person that does the blog. I had another one. I was telling Paramjit at lunch that I was just getting some money out of the cash till, and this woman said, "Oh, it's you off the telly," and she'd seen the the TV series sort of thing. But I was all pleased with myself, and then she said, "Do you know Paramjit?" And I thought, so he's the real star.
He's the real star,
without a doubt.
So then you haven't had as much experience with that. But
no, I've actually done one event, the Spitfire event, and what a thing to do in your first 6 months, you know.
And how did you feel about that as a first?
It's amazing. I sort of come in at the end of COVID. I don't know, still sort of there. So everything was very much digital behind the screen. Yeah. And I hadn't met an Airfix fan, so to speak, in person, and I got to meet 100 of them in one go. So it was really eye-opening. Yeah. An amazing event.
And then hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll be going back to a few this year.
Well, it's nice because if you do the model shows, it's that vibrant community of people, and you get to see the same people. But they always vary the displays, and it's like I was saying before. It's like art. Some of the things are absolutely astonishing. And there's some groups that they. I'm not saying this because we're Airfix, but they are sort of Airfix centric displays, and it's just really interesting to see the era of the things that we did, because we've not just done aeroplanes. In the past, we've done things like dinosaurs and birds and little soldiers.
You hear a lot about dinosaurs. Come on,
yeah. Here we go again. That's it.
The famous Airfix dinosaur, T-Rex.
Yeah, and it's just nice to see that, and then to see how people finish them. And when you do the big nationals at Telford, and you get the chance to look round some of the competition entries. I mean, it's astonishing. You'd think, well, it must take them a full year to do that, but they don't. They knock them out in a few weeks, And some of our older kits, like the dinosaurs, I remember seeing one a couple of years back that this guy done it, and it made the skin look. It was glistening. It looked like it was real. Like you touched it, it was actually. And I don't know how they do it, but it's very clever.
Yeah.
But it's very much like art. And the difficulty you've got is you start at one end and you intend to see everything. You can't, because there's just that much to see, and people get to chat with you if they know you from Airfix and stuff. But I'm really looking forward to getting back to that, because it's a real enjoyment of the hobby. And before COVID kicked in, unfortunately, we did a few things, and we went to shows, and we were allowed to give them like display of the day where they got a little Airfix trophy and what have you. And it was so well received that it's nice, because obviously Airfix is a big name in the hobby, and it's nice just to go around and reward them for their efforts, because these guys build in their little offices or on the dining room table, and they put themes together, and then they lay out these displays for our entertainment, and most people just go along, go up at them, take a few pictures, and don't even interact with them. So it's always nice to stop and have a chat with them, but. It's great, and it's nice to see all the people with a similar interest all together.
Well, I want to finish up by giving a few sort of quick fire-ish questions, but you can answer as sort of off the top of your head as you can. Why do you love, or what do you love about Airfix?
Oh, just what it means to people. Over the years and years and years, people building Airfix kits. It's benefits to mental health, and just how well known it is. Yeah.
I think it's history in miniature. I like history. Everybody loves it. If you're not into history, there's something wrong with you. And I think what we do is we replicate history in scale, and I think it's really nice to be involved in that. So, and just to play your part in the history of the company, because whatever we do for the rest of our lives, we can say that we spent X number of years representing this fantastic brand. So
and finding out why people choose to build as well. A lot of their family might have been involved in, I don't know, the war, and have flown in these aircraft, and that's why they're building them. Hearing those stories.
And that's what you pick up at the shows. There's a couple of guys who they replicate some event that their parent was involved in. One guy did this beautiful diorama of it was a bullfighter that had crashed in the desert, and it was his father that was in the aircraft, and he made this beautiful scene. So, like I say, it was like a 3D bit of art, using one of our kits as the the focal point, really. So.
Okay, Hellcat or Wildcat?
That's not fair.
I'm gonna go Hellcat.
Yeah.
It's such an impressive kit. We're talking about the kit on the roof.
Are we? Oh, I thought we were talking. I was thinking real thing. It's not fair. The poor Wildcat. Yeah, Wildcat. It's a really raw deal. The poor little thing, and it kept us all fighting. I'll go for Wildcat then.
Yeah.
Because somebody has to stick up for it.
Spitfire or Messerschmitt?
Spitfire. It's got to be no.
Messerschmitt. Although Spitfire's got a part to play, because the Messerschmitt needs something to chase.
Painting or building?
Building.
Yeah.
I'll say painting, because
it's just going against me, isn't it?
No, it's because sometimes it's with some of these easier kits you'll see that, because a lot of the guys, it's about the colour schemes and the variations of the colour schemes. Those are the interesting things. So you could get the same subject, but you could paint it in loads of different ways. They might be perfectly accurate, and you could have 30 different examples of it, and they all look slightly different. I think so. Yeah, that was a long-winded way of saying painting.
And what's the best biscuit for dunking into your tea?
I'm going to say hobnob out of loyalty to the...
I'm not allowed because I'm on a diet, but I would say rich tea, but they always drop in, don't they? So it'll have to be a chocolate digestive, just to be different.
And obviously, with you're a part of the community. You talk to Airfix. Will the Airfix community get a chance to see you at events this year? Do you think?
Well, it depends if they do another Where's Cleggy type thing. You might see me wandering about.
Well, I'm in charge of social media now,
so
don't do it.
Give us a like if you want to do Where's Cleggy at
Don't
Telford.
do it, Brooke. Don't do it. We'll talk about that. Money might change hands. We don't want that to happen. Hopefully, yeah. I mean, we as a business, we have to be mindful of the business position with that. But we would love to. The whole team would really look forward to that. So fingers crossed. Let's hope it happens.
We are planning on it, but can't say too much right now.
I'm sure.
But if we do, I can't wait to meet.
Yeah, come up, and if we do an event, hopefully we'll come up and say hi and chat to you, and we'll definitely be doing Where's Cleggy again. 100%. Well,
hashtag Where's Cleggy.
Get it trending. Thank you so much for both joining me. I really appreciate you giving me your time and sitting here and chatting. I think we probably could have chatted for a lot longer than we have. Definitely. So thank you for being here. Thank you for everyone at home for watching. Next month, as we mentioned, Models for Heroes are going to be here with us talking about mental health and Airfix and what are the amazing things that they do. So thank you, and hopefully we'll get you guys on again and talk more community.
If you have us back.
Oh, definitely, 100%.
You're not a bad
host. We've lost our jobs now.
Thank you for watching, and as always, like, subscribe, check below for all of the links, and we'll see you next time on Sprue Talk. See you later.